The silence in the Grand Hall of Ascension was absolute when Marcus Cole stepped forward and spoke the words that shattered 1,000 years of tradition. "I refuse." Empress Vaelithra's golden eyes widened almost imperceptibly, the only crack in her perfect composure. Around the obsidian throne, the Caliph nobility erupted in whispers that scraped against the crystalline walls like wind through dead leaves. Marcus stood alone in the center of the ceremonial circle, still wearing the simple gray uniform of a diplomatic attaché, surrounded by beings who towered over him by at least 2 feet, their silver skin catching the bioluminescent light of the chamber. "You refuse." High Consul Dreneth stepped forward, his elongated fingers tightening around his staff of office. "Human, do you comprehend what you reject? The Empress has offered you the right of ascendant consort. You would share her throne, command her fleets, father the next dynasty." "I understand perfectly," Marcus said. His voice didn't waver, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "And I refuse." The whispers died. In the Caliph Empire, such an offer had never been declined. The right of ascendant consort was the highest honor a non-Caliph could receive, a path to power that countless species had fought wars to obtain. And this human, this representative of a species that had only achieved interstellar travel 3 decades ago, was throwing it away. Empress Vaelithra rose from her throne. She moved like liquid silver, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her, the living metal crown upon her brow pulsing with ancient light. At 7 feet tall, she was considered short for her kind, a fact that had been used against her since birth. The diminished empress, they called her behind closed doors. The ruler who had never taken a consort because none would accept the perceived shame of bonding with one so reduced. "Leave us," she commanded. The nobility hesitated. High Consul Dreneth's lips parted to protest. "Now." They filed out in rigid silence, their disapproval a physical weight in the air. When the great doors sealed shut, Vaelithra descended the steps of her dais with measured grace. She stopped 3 paces from Marcus, close enough that he could see the faint luminescence beneath her skin, the subtle patterns that shifted with her emotional state. Patterns she had been taught since childhood to suppress. "Why?" The word was barely a whisper. Marcus met her gaze. Most humans found it impossible to maintain eye contact with Caliph royalty, something about the depth of those golden irises, the weight of millennia behind them. But Marcus had spent 2 years on this world. He had learned. "Because you don't want a consort," he said quietly. "You want a weapon. A political tool to silence the nobles who question your right to rule. A human on your throne would be exotic enough to distract, controllable enough to manage, and disposable enough to sacrifice when the time came." The patterns beneath her skin flickered. Loss. Anger. He couldn't tell. "You presume to know my mind." "I presume nothing, Your Majesty, I observe." He paused. "You've never once looked at me the way someone looks at a potential partner. You look at me the way a general looks at a fortification. Calculating. Strategic." For a long moment Vaelithra said nothing. Then something extraordinary happened, something Marcus had never witnessed in 2 years of serving in the diplomatic corps. She laughed. It was small, almost silent, barely more than a breath. But it was real. "Ambassador Chen warned me about you," she said. "He said you were too perceptive for your own good. That you had a tendency to see through people." The humor faded from her voice. "He also said you lost your family in the Proxima collapse. That you volunteered for the most distant posting humanity offered because you had nothing left to lose." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Ambassador Chen talks too much." "Perhaps." Vaelithra tilted her head, studying him with new eyes. "Or perhaps he wanted me to understand that you were not merely another ambitious human seeking advancement. You were something far more dangerous. And what's that? Honest." She turned away, ascending back toward her throne. "Do you know what they call me, Marcus Cole? When they think I cannot hear. The diminished empress." She paused on the steps. "You do not soften the blow. You asked for honesty. So I did." She settled onto the throne, but she did not assume the formal posture of rulership. Instead, she sat with a weariness that transformed her from distant monarch to something painfully mortal. "I have ruled for 47 cycles. In that time, I have been offered 17 potential consorts from the noble houses. Each one looked upon me with barely concealed disgust. Too short. Too weak. Too wrong." Her hands curled around the arms of the throne. "When my advisors suggested seeking a consort among the newer species, one who would not know or care about Caliph standards of form, I allowed myself to hope. Hope for what? That someone might look at me and see a person. Not a throne to be claimed. Not a weakness to be exploited. Just a person. The vulnerability in her voice struck Marcus like a physical blow. He had spent 2 years building walls between himself and this world, refusing to let himself care about anything or anyone since Elena and the children had died in the collapse of Proxima Station. He had come here to disappear, to serve out his years in irrelevant bureaucratic obscurity until his body finally followed his heart into oblivion. He had not counted on this. Your Majesty, Vaelithra. If you are to reject my throne, you might as well use my name. Vaelithra. He hesitated. I didn't refuse because you're not worth choosing. I refused because you deserve to be chosen by someone who wants you, not what you represent. And you deserve a consort who isn't using you to run from their own grief. She looked at him sharply. You think yourself unworthy? I think I'm broken. And broken things cut the people who hold them. For a long moment, the Empress of the Caliph, ruler of 7 star systems, commander of the most powerful fleet in the quadrant, simply looked at the small, fragile human standing in her hall. The patterns beneath her skin shifted into something he had never seen before. Perhaps, she said slowly, broken things recognize each other. The words hung in the air between them. Then the doors burst open and High Consul Dreneth's voice shattered the moment. Your Majesty, the Veth Hegemony fleet has crossed the border. They are coming for Caliph Prime. 3 weeks into the siege, Marcus learned that Vaelithra took her evening meal alone in the war room. The rest of the command staff had retreated to their quarters hours ago, exhausted from another day of coordinating the defense against the Veth Hegemony's relentless assault. The shields were holding, barely, and human reinforcements were still 12 days away. 12 days that might as well be 12 centuries. Marcus found her bent over the holographic display, her meal untouched beside her. The living metal of her crown had dimmed to a dull silver, responding to her exhaustion. She didn't look up when he entered. You should eat, he said. I should do many things. Her fingers traced the trajectory of the Veth fleet. I should have built stronger alliances. I should have reinforced the outer systems. I should have. You should eat. This time she looked up and he saw something he had never expected to see in the eyes of an empress: surrender. Not to him. To circumstance. To the weight of a crown she had never asked to wear. My grandmother ruled for 200 cycles, she said quietly. My mother for 80. I have managed 47. And now I will be remembered as the empress who lost Caliph Prime to the Veth. The diminished empress indeed. Marcus crossed to the tactical display and stood beside her. You're not dead yet. A stirring battle cry. I'm a diplomatic attaché, not a poet. He studied the enemy positions. The Veth are maintaining a standard siege formation. Overwhelming force, slow constriction. They're not in a hurry. Because they believe time is on their side. Our shields cannot hold indefinitely. No. But they're not attacking because they think they don't need to. They're complacent. Marcus tapped a section of the display. What's here? The morning fields. An asteroid belt. Navigationally hazardous, tactically irrelevant. Tactically irrelevant to a conventional fleet. What about a small strike force? 20 ships, maybe 30? Vaelithra's eyes narrowed. The Veth would detect any sortie of that size before it reached the fields. They'd detect a Caliph sortie. Would they detect human ships? Human vessels are... She paused. Smaller, less refined. They rate as background noise on most sensor arrays. Smaller, less refined, frequently underestimated. Marcus allowed himself a thin smile. Sound familiar? For the first time in weeks, something like hope flickered in her expression. You have human ships in the system? Ambassador Chen has 3 diplomatic corvettes officially for courier duty. Unofficially, they're armed well enough to cause problems. And the crew? They're volunteers. All of them. Why would humans volunteer to die for a Caliph world? Marcus met her gaze. Because I asked them to. The patterns beneath her skin shifted again, that strange configuration he had first seen in the throne room. You asked them to die for my empire, I asked them to fight for someone worth fighting for. She stared at him. You rejected my throne. I rejected being used. I didn't reject you. The words hung between them, weighted with everything neither of them had been willing to say. Vaelithra's hand moved, hesitated, then settled over his on the tactical display. Her touch was cooler than a human's, smooth as polished stone. But there was nothing cold about the way her fingers curved around his. Marcus Cole, she said softly, you are the most confusing being I have ever encountered. I've been told that before. By whom? My wife, before she died. Vaelithra's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. The Proxima collapse. She was a station engineer. Our children were with her when the reactor breached. He forced himself to keep speaking, to push through the old wound. I was on a supply run. 90 minutes away. Close enough to watch the station burn. Too far to do anything but scream. How long ago? 4 years. 3 months. 12 days. You count. Every day. She was silent for a long moment. Then, I had a brother once. Twin-born. Among my people, twins are considered a single soul and 2 bodies. When one dies, the other is expected to follow within a cycle. Her voice dropped. He was killed in a border skirmish when we were barely past our naming day. I was 19 cycles old. The priest told me I should prepare for my journey to the beyond. But you didn't go. No? I refused. I fought. I clawed my way back to life despite everything my body and my culture told me I should want. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed with old pain, and for that they called me unnatural. Wrong. Diminished. Because you survived? Because I chose to survive. In Caelith tradition, twins who lose their other half are expected to embrace oblivion. To fight death is to reject the sacred bond. She turned to face him fully. You understand, don't you? The guilt of living when others did not. The weight of every breath you take knowing they cannot share it. Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed around words he had never been able to say, not to the counselors, not to Ambassador Chen, not to anyone in the 4 years since Proxima. But Vaelithra saw. Somehow, impossibly she saw. We are both diminished, she said quietly. Both broken in ways our people cannot forgive. Perhaps that is why I find your presence bearable. Bearable. That everything, he almost smiled. High praise. The highest I've given in 47 cycles. Her hand was still on his. Neither of them moved to break the contact. The strike force, Marcus said finally. If it works, if we can disrupt the Veth formation, it will only buy time, not victory. Time is what we need. Time is what we need. Time for your reinforcements. Time for my nobles to remember where their loyalty lies. Her fingers intertwined with his. Will you lead this mission yourself? Someone needs to. That is not an answer. Yes, I'll lead it. You could die. I could, but at least it would mean something. Vaelithra was quiet for a long moment. Then she released his hand and reached up to the living metal crown upon her brow. The ancient artifact responded to her touch, a small segment separating and reshaping itself into a simple band that she pressed into his palm. This is a binding token, she said. Among my people, it signifies many things. Protection. Recognition. In the old days it marked one who was chosen for the royal hunt, those who fought at the sovereign's side regardless of rank or station. I can't accept. You refuse this as well. I don't want to take something under false pretenses. I told you I'm not consort material. Did I offer you a consort's binding? Her eyes held his. I offer you the token of a warrior. Companion in battle. Nothing more, and nothing less. Unless... She hesitated. Unless you wish to refuse that as well. Marcus looked at the metal band in his hand. It was warm where it touched his skin, pulsing faintly with a rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. No, he said. This I accept. The patterns beneath Vaelithra's skin shifted into that unfamiliar configuration once more, and this time he realized what it meant. Hope. The morning fields earned their name. The 28 ships that had launched from the shadow of Caelith Prime's largest moon, 11 survived to reach the Veth command vessel's flank. Of those 11, only 4 emerged from the resulting chaos when the Veth Admiral's flagship erupted in nuclear fire. Marcus's corvette was not among them. Vaelithra received the news in the war room, surrounded by officers who watched her with the calculating eyes of predators sensing weakness. High Consul Dreneth stood closest, his expression carefully neutral, but she knew what lurked beneath that mask. He had opposed the humans' plan from the beginning. Now he would use this failure to finally cement his influence over her reign. The humans' strategy was audacious, Dreneth said, his tone suggesting the opposite, but ultimately futile. The Veth fleet remains largely intact, and we have lost valuable. The Veth fleet has withdrawn beyond the third orbital shell. Admiral Vareth's voice cut through Drenith's pontification like a blade. The old warrior had served Vaelithra's grandmother, and she was one of the few members of the command staff who had never called her Empress diminished, at least not where anyone could hear. Withdrawn? Drenith's composure cracked. Impossible. They had us surrounded. The destruction of their command vessel threw their fleet into chaos. Their admiral is dead. Their coordinating intelligence is scattered, and the human reinforcements have entered the system 40 hours ahead of schedule. Vareth turned to Vaelithra, and something that might have been respect flickered in her ancient eyes. The siege is broken, Your Majesty. The humans' plan worked. The war room erupted in confused murmurs. Victory, unexpected, unexplainable victory, had fallen into their laps, and the nobles who had spent weeks preparing their surrender were suddenly scrambling to reposition themselves as loyal defenders of the throne. Vaelithra heard none of it. He was staring at the tactical display, at the scattered debris field that marked the grave of the Veth command vessel, and somewhere within it, the wreckage of a human corvette, and the man who had given her hope for the first time in 47 cycles. Your Majesty? Drenith's voice intruded. The human fleet commander requests an audience. There are matters of protocol. Later. But Your Majesty, I said later. She swept from the war room before anyone could see the moisture gathering in her eyes, moisture that her people did not shed, could not shed, except in the most extreme circumstances of grief. Twins mourning twins. Parents mourning children. Never an empress mourning a diplomatic attaché from an insignificant species. But the patterns beneath her skin screamed what her face would not show. She reached her private chambers and sealed the doors behind her. The binding token she had given Marcus, the one he had worn into battle, was gone. Destroyed with him. The connection she had felt through the living metal, that faint pulse of his presence, had vanished 3 hours ago in a flash of nuclear fire. She had not wept for her brother. Not truly. The grief had frozen inside her, becoming the armor she wore against a court that wanted her to die. But now the armor cracked. She sank to her knees before the great window that overlooked Calith Prime's wounded skyline. And she wept. For a human she had known for weeks. For a connection she had been too afraid to name. For the hope that had flickered to life only to be extinguished in the void between stars. She did not hear the door open behind her. Your Majesty? The voice was weak, damaged, but unmistakable. Vaelithra spun. Marcus Cole stood in the doorway, supported by 2 human medics and wrapped in emergency thermal blanket. His face was burned on one side, his left arm hung in a stabilizing field. And he was looking at her with eyes that held the same impossible hope she had seen in her own reflection. They pulled me out of the wreckage, he said. The ambassador's people. They were tracking my beacon in... He trailed off, staring at her. You're crying. Calith, do not cry. You're crying. She rose to her feet. Crossed the distance between them. The medics backed away hastily as their empress approached. No one touched Calith royalty unbidden. No one. She pulled Marcus into her arms. He was warm where she was cool. Fragile where she was strong. Broken in all the ways she was broken. And when her arms closed around him, when she felt the flutter of his human heartbeat against her chest, the frozen place inside her, the place that had been ice since her brother died, began to thaw. I thought you were dead, she whispered. Almost was. His uninjured arm came up to hold her. Thought about letting go. In the wreckage. It would have been easy. Just stop fighting. Stop breathing. Go where Elena and the kids went. But you didn't. No. His voice caught, because someone once told me that choosing to survive, even when everything tells you to give up, isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of strength. She pulled back just far enough to look at his face. I said that? You said that? I am wise. You're ridiculous. But he was smiling. And you're crying. I am not. She touched her own face, felt the moisture there, and made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. This is your fault, humans, and their emotional contagion. Sorry, no you're not, no. I'm not. They stood there, empress and attaché, tangled together in a way that violated every protocol either of their peoples had ever devised. The medics had fled. The doors were sealed. And for one perfect moment, nothing existed except the two of them and the choice they were making, together, to stay alive. The Treaty of Renewed Stars was signed 6 months later in the same grand hall where Marcus had refused a throne. The gathered dignitaries, human, Caliph, and representatives of a dozen allied species, watched as Empress Vaelithra affixed her seal to the document that would reshape galactic politics for generations. The Veth hegemony had been driven back. The human-Caliph alliance had proven stronger than anyone anticipated, and the diminished Empress had emerged from the crisis as the most respected sovereign in the quadrant. But the whispers had not entirely stopped. As the ceremony concluded and the delegates mingled in carefully orchestrated social formations, High Consul Drenith approached the throne where Vaelithra sat in formal state. Marcus stood at her side, not behind her as protocol demanded for a consort, but beside her as an equal. "Your Majesty," Drenith said, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the nearby nobles, "the council has reviewed the humans' position. Given his role in breaking the siege and his continued presence at court, we feel it would be appropriate to revisit the matter of the ascendant consort." Vaelithra's expression remained serene. "Oh? The human has proven himself useful, valuable even. The council believes it would strengthen your position to formalize the relationship." Drenith's smile was thin as a blade. "To give him a title, a role, something permanent." Marcus felt Vaelithra's hand find his, hidden from view by the folds of her ceremonial robes. Her fingers were warm, warmer than they had been 6 months ago, as if proximity to humans had begun to change her in subtle ways. "The council wishes me to make Marcus Cole my consort," she said. "To place him on my throne, for the good of the Empire, Your Majesty. For the good of the Empire." She was silent for a moment. "Then, tell me, High Consul, if I were to offer Marcus the throne, and he were to accept, what position would that leave you?" Drenith's smile flickered. "I don't understand. As ascendant consort, Marcus would outrank every member of the council. He would have authority over military deployments, trade negotiations, colonial policy. He would be, in effect, my co-ruler." Her golden eyes fixed on Drenith with sudden intensity. "Is that truly what the council desires? To place a human above themselves?" The silence stretched. Around them, the nobles had stopped their conversations, sensing the shift in the room's political winds. "Your Majesty," Drenith said carefully, the council suggests that I formalize a relationship they believe they can control." Vaelithra rose from her throne, and her voice rang through the hall. "They suggest that I bind the human to a role that would make him a figurehead, a symbol to parade before our allies and a tool to manage behind closed doors. They suggest this because they have never understood what Marcus Cole truly represents." She descended from the dais, still holding Marcus's hand, drawing him forward until they stood together before the assembled dignitaries. "6 months ago I offered this man a throne, power, prestige, everything that the Caliph Empire could provide." She turned to face him fully. "And you refused. The entire court heard you. They have spent 6 months wondering why." Marcus met her gaze. The scars on his face had faded but not disappeared, permanent reminders of the battle that had almost killed him. He wore formal attire now, human style with Caliph accents, a visual declaration that he belonged to neither world entirely. "Why did you refuse the throne?" Vaelithra asked, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Marcus was aware of the watching eyes, the recording devices, the weight of history pressing down on this moment. But when he looked at Vaelithra, he saw only her. The woman who had held him in her chambers while he wept for his lost family. The ruler who had sat beside his recovery bed reading him Caliph poetry. The partner who had slowly, carefully taught him that survival could be more than mere existence. "Because you deserve to keep it," he said. The words fell into absolute silence. Then Vaelithra smiled, not the measured expression of an empress, but the genuine warmth of a woman who had finally found someone who saw her clearly. "There," she said, turning back to her court. "Do you understand now? This man refused power because he believed I was worthy of wielding it alone. He fought for my empire not because he wanted to rule it, but because he wanted me to continue ruling it. He chose," her voice caught momentarily, "he chose to value me over everything he could have gained from me." She raised their joined hands, displaying the binding token that now circled both their wrists, 2 bands of living metal that had merged into a single unbroken loop. "This is not a consort's binding," she declared. "This is a partnership, equal in honor, equal in standing, and bound by choice rather than obligation. Her eyes swept the room, daring anyone to object. Marcus Cole will never sit upon my throne because he does not need to. He stands beside it, as I stand beside him, and together we will build something that neither of our peoples has ever seen before. High Consul Drenith's face had gone pale. Around him the nobles shifted uneasily, their carefully laid plans crumbling in the face of an alliance they had never anticipated. But among the human delegation, Ambassador Chen was smiling. And Admiral Vareth, ancient and weathered and wise, inclined her head in a gesture of respect that she had never offered to any consort in 300 cycles of service. Later, when the ceremony was over and the dignitaries had departed, Vaelithra and Marcus stood alone on the balcony, overlooking the restored skyline of Calith Prime. The Veth weapons had left scars, but the city was rebuilding. Growing. Changing. Like them. You know, Marcus said quietly, there are going to be people who never accept this. Calith who see me as an interloper. Humans who think I've forgotten where I came from. Yes. It won't be easy. No. There will be crises. Conflicts. Moments when everything we've built threatens to fall apart. Undoubtedly. Vaelithra leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, and we will face them together. As we faced the Veth. As we faced our own grief and fear and broken pieces. Together. Together. The twin moons of Calith Prime rose over the horizon, casting silver light across the world they had fought to save. And in that light, two broken people, an empress who had chosen to survive, and a man who had learned to live again, held each other in the comfortable silence of those who no longer need words to be understood. They were not healed. Not entirely. Perhaps they never would be. But they were no longer diminished.